The skies above Seoul darkened as the Galactic Confederation ships entered Earth's atmosphere. Commander Park sat rigidly in his chair at the UN Defense Council, watching the holographic display with thinly veiled frustration. "They're positioning themselves above major cities," reported Lieutenant Kim, her fingers dancing across the tactical screen. Still no response to communications. The Confederation, an alliance of 17 advanced species, had discovered Earth 3 months ago. Initial diplomatic meetings had been tense, with the alien representatives barely disguising their contempt for what they considered a primitive species. "They said they were sending diplomats," Park muttered. "Those aren't diplomatic vessels." The first energy blast struck Tokyo without warning. Within minutes, similar attacks hit Shanghai, New York, and London. "Sir," Kim's voice trembled slightly, "we're receiving a transmission." The alien commander, a tall being with iridescent scales, appeared on screen. "Your species is too unpredictable to join galactic society. This containment strike is necessary for the greater good." Earth's conventional defenses launched immediately, but proved ineffective against the advanced shielding of the alien vessels. After causing significant damage, the Confederation fleet retreated to the edge of the solar system. Hours later, the Confederation Council officially condemned the attack as the work of radicals. But intelligence intercepted communications suggesting a full invasion was being prepared. What the aliens didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this possibility for years. Commander Park rubbed his tired eyes as he walked through the underground bunker beneath Seoul. The attack had come just as their intelligence had predicted it might. For years, astronomers had detected strange signals from deep space, and governments around the world had secretly prepared. "Casualties?" Park asked as he entered the command center. 20,000 confirmed dead, sir. Mostly in Tokyo and New York," replied Kim, her face pale but composed. She had not slept in 36 hours. On the main screen, news footage showed the smoking ruins of Tokyo Tower. Park felt a cold anger rise in his chest. The aliens had struck without warning, without honor. "Get me the president," he ordered. Within minutes, the leaders of Earth's major nations appeared on separate screens. They looked tired, angry, but determined. "It's time," said the American president. "Activate Project Shield." Park nodded. For 10 years, Earth had maintained a public image of technological simplicity, while secretly developing defenses against possible alien threats. The Confederation thought they had found an easy target. They were wrong. At military bases around the world, hidden hangars opened. Ships not even known to most military personnel rose into the air. They were smaller than the alien vessels, but built with technology reverse-engineered from a crashed scout ship found in the Arctic 15 years ago. "All defense squadrons reporting ready," said Kim, a hint of pride in her voice. Park opened a secure channel to all Earth vessels. "This is Commander Park. The enemy believes us defenseless. Let them continue to believe that. Hold positions at the outer atmosphere. Do not engage unless attacked. We need time." In his private office, Park accessed a terminal that required his DNA, retinal scan, and voice authorization. Only 5 people on Earth had access to this system. The screen lit up with a simple message: "Leviathan status. Ready for deployment." Park entered the command code and pressed his palm against the screen. "Authorize Leviathan launch. Authentication Park 77 Delta." Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility built inside an underwater trench, lights came on in a massive chamber. Engineers and scientists who had lived there for years moved with practiced efficiency. At the center of the chamber sat humanity's greatest achievement and most closely guarded secret. Captain Yoon strapped herself into the command chair of the Leviathan. Unlike the defensive ships now in orbit, this vessel had never been tested in actual combat. It incorporated everything humanity had learned about alien technology, plus innovations the Confederation couldn't imagine. "All systems check complete," reported Chief Engineer Han. "Fusion core stable. Quantum shields at full capacity." Yoon nodded. Prepare for surface breach. The massive ceiling of the underwater facility began to open, allowing billions of gallons of seawater to pour in. The Leviathan's systems remained undisturbed, protected by field technology that kept water molecules from touching its hull. On the Confederation command ship, Admiral Taro watched with satisfaction as his fleet regrouped near Saturn. The humans had deployed some defensive vessels, but scans showed they posed no significant threat. Their technology is at least 2 centuries behind ours, he told his officers. The containment strike was necessary. Now we will complete our mission. One of his sensor officers suddenly stood up. Admiral, we're detecting an unusual energy signature from Earth. I've never seen readings like this. Before Taro could respond, communication screens throughout his ship activated without authorization. A human female in a uniform appeared on every screen. This is Captain Yoon of the Earth defense vessel Leviathan, she said calmly. Your unprovoked attack on our planet constitutes an act of war. We will defend ourselves. Taro laughed. One vessel. Brave, but foolish. His laughter died as the sensor readings updated. The human ship rising from Earth's ocean was massive, nearly twice the size of his command vessel. And the energy readings defied everything he understood about human capability. Impossible, he whispered. In Seoul, Commander Park allowed himself a small smile as he watched the Leviathan break the surface of the Pacific. The aliens thought they knew humanity. They were about to learn how wrong they were. For years, Earth had appeared weak, divided, and technologically simple. It was all carefully crafted deception. Now, the shield was coming down. The real humanity was about to stand up. The Leviathan rose toward the stars, carrying with it humanity's message to the galaxy. We will not be conquered. 5 years earlier, beneath the Pacific Ocean, the largest secret installation in human history had been established. Director Lee reviewed the progress reports with satisfaction. How soon can Leviathan be ready for deployment? Chief Engineer Han wiped sweat from his brow. The fusion core is stable. Quantum computing arrays are operating at 97% efficiency. We'll be ready when they return. Project Leviathan had been humanity's insurance policy. While publicly presenting Earth as a developing world with basic space capabilities, the United Governments had pooled resources into creating a weapon that could stand against whatever threats the stars might hold. Captain Yoon has completed the final simulation, reported Security Officer Kang. Her tactical scores are unprecedented. Captain Jin Yoon had been selected from thousands of candidates to command the Leviathan. A brilliant naval strategist with an unorthodox approach to combat, she had faced opposition from traditional military leadership until her methods proved effective in every test scenario. As alien reinforcements gathered at Neptune's orbit, Leviathan underwent its final systems check. The massive vessel, hidden in an underwater trench, had never been tested in actual combat. Everything humanity had learned about alien technology had been incorporated into its design, along with innovations the Confederation couldn't imagine. The call came at midnight. Captain Yoon. Director Lee's voice was steady despite the gravity of the situation. It's time. The underwater base hummed with energy. 5 kilometers beneath the Pacific Ocean, hidden from even the most advanced satellite detection, Project Leviathan had grown for nearly a decade. The walls of the main hangar stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Director Lee walked along the observation deck, watching as hundreds of engineers and scientists moved with purpose below. They all wore simple blue uniforms with no country flags or symbols. Here, they were not American or Russian or Chinese. They were human. The test results look good, said Chief Han, joining Lee at the railing. The new shield design absorbed 99% of the energy in simulations. Lee nodded, his eyes fixed on the massive shape that dominated the hangar. Leviathan. Even after overseeing its construction for 8 years, the sight of it still took his breath away. The ship was black as space itself, its hull designed to absorb rather than reflect light. It was shaped like no ocean vessel or spacecraft humans had publicly built before, sleek and predatory, with none of the bulk or awkwardness of conventional designs. At almost 2 kilometers long, it dwarfed the largest aircraft carriers. "Is it true what they're saying?" Han asked quietly. "About the signals from deep space?" Lee's face tightened. "Yes. Our deep space array picked up communications between approaching vessels. They're speaking about Earth." "What are they saying?" "They're debating whether to make contact or simply—" Lee paused. "Contain us." Han looked pale. "How long?" 3 years at most. Maybe sooner." They watched as robots welded sections of the outer hull. The metal was unlike anything publicly known, created through a manufacturing process that altered the atomic structure of conventional materials. "Captain Yoon wants to speak with you," Han said after a moment. "She has questions about the weapon systems." In the simulation chamber, Captain Jin Yoon studied holographic displays of attack patterns. She was younger than most had expected for such a command. Only 34. Her hair was cut practical and short, and her eyes missed nothing. "Director," she said when Lee entered, "I need authorization to run the main cannons at full power in simulation." Lee frowned. "That would drain half our facility's power. We'd be visible to satellite detection for at least 90 seconds. I need to know how they perform against multiple targets." She pulled up a tactical display. "Based on the signals we intercepted, their fleet formations have specific weaknesses. If we can hit these key points with enough force, we can break their command structure." Lee studied her carefully. Yoon had been a controversial choice. The military leaders had wanted someone older, more traditional. But her tactical brilliance couldn't be denied. "You have 1 hour tonight," Lee decided. "We'll route power through our backup systems to mask the signature." Later that night, as the simulation ran, Lee watched Yoon work. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, her expression calm even as she directed simulated attacks that would destroy entire fleets. "She's something, isn't she?" said Security Officer Kang, joining Lee in the observation room. "The best tactical mind I've ever seen," Lee agreed, "but I worry about her detachment." Kang shook his head. "It's not detachment. It's focus. I've spoken with her when she's off duty. She understands exactly what's at stake." On the main screen, the simulation showed Leviathan tearing through enemy formations, its weapons cutting through shields that had been modeled on the most advanced theoretical alien technology. "Simulation complete," announced the computer. "Enemy fleet neutralized. Leviathan sustained 12% damage to outer hull. All critical systems intact." Yoon sat back in her chair, finally allowing herself a small smile. 3 days later, Lee called an emergency meeting. The senior staff gathered in the secure conference room, faces tense. "The aliens have accelerated their approach," Lee announced. "Our deep space array detected a scout ship entering the solar system yesterday. It's likely they'll discover Earth within months, not years." Chief Han leaned forward. "Leviathan isn't ready. We need at least another year to complete all systems." "We don't have a year," Lee replied. "Captain Yoon, what's your assessment?" Yoon considered the question carefully. "We can fight with what we have. The main weapons and shields are operational. We'll need to complete the secondary systems while maintaining operational status." "That's never been done before," Han protested. "None of this has been done before," Yoon replied simply. The meeting ended with new timelines established. Every department would work around the clock. Families on the surface were told their loved ones' assignments had been extended indefinitely. Late that night, Lee found Yoon in the observation deck, looking at Leviathan. "Are you afraid?" he asked her. "No," she said, "but I am concerned." "About what?" She turned to him. "About what happens after. If we win, everything changes. Humanity will know we're not alone, and they'll know their governments kept it secret." Lee nodded slowly. "One problem at a time, Captain. First, we have to survive." As months passed, the alien presence grew closer. Earth governments publicly denied any knowledge of extraterrestrial contact, while secretly preparing their populations through subtle cultural shifts and educational changes. Leviathan was now 85% complete. Engineers worked in shifts that sometimes lasted 20 hours. The ship's unique properties were tested in controlled conditions, showing capabilities that would have been considered impossible just a decade earlier. Then the call came that they had all been dreading. The alien fleet had arrived in Earth orbit without warning. First contact had begun, and it had not gone well. Admiral Dew of the Confederation fleet smiled as his armada approached Earth. His species had conquered 12 worlds, and Earth would be the 13th. Human defenses are minimal, reported his second-in-command. This will be swift. As the fleet entered Earth orbit, sensors detected unusual activity in the Pacific Ocean. Before Dew could order an investigation, the sea itself seemed to part. Rising from the depths came a vessel that dwarfed the largest Confederation dreadnought. Its dark hull absorbed light rather than reflected it, creating an unsettling silhouette against Earth's blue waters. "Impossible," whispered Dew. "Our intelligence indicated no such capability." Confederation vessels. Captain Hume's voice transmitted across all frequencies. "This is the Earth defense vessel Leviathan. You have violated sovereign territory and committed acts of war. Withdraw immediately." Admiral Dew recovered his composure. "Your single vessel, however surprising, cannot stand against our fleet. Surrender now." Yoon's response was to activate Leviathan's defensive systems. As the Confederation ships fired, their energy weapons struck barriers that didn't merely block the attacks. They absorbed and redirected the energy back at the alien vessels. "What is this technology?" demanded Dew as 3 of his ships lost power from their own reflected attacks. "This contradicts all known physical principles." The Leviathan moved with impossible grace for its size, its main cannons firing concentrated bursts that penetrated Confederation shields as if they weren't there. Admiral Dew stood frozen on the bridge of his command ship. The massive human vessel, now rising from the ocean, defied everything the Confederation knew about Earth technology. His scales shifted from confident purple to anxious yellow as he watched the impossible sight. "All ships, target that vessel," he ordered, his voice tight. Full power to weapons. The Confederation fleet consisted of 37 warships. They were the pride of their civilization, equipped with technology that had conquered a dozen worlds. The weapons that had just hours ago devastated Earth's cities now turned toward the lone ship rising from the ocean. Inside the Leviathan, Captain Yoon sat calmly in her command chair. The bridge was unlike anything in conventional naval vessels. There were no windows, only screens showing perfect views in all directions. The crew worked quietly at their stations, faces intense but not frightened. "They're targeting us," reported the sensor officer. "All their vessels." Yoon nodded. "Shields at maximum. Prepare countermeasures." The attack came as a wall of energy. Beams of destructive force struck the Leviathan from multiple directions. For a moment, the massive ship was completely hidden within the blinding light of the attack. On his bridge, Admiral Dew smiled. No vessel could survive that level of concentrated fire. His smile vanished as the light faded. The Leviathan floated unharmed. More than that, the strange field surrounding it pulsed with the energy it had just absorbed. "Sir," his weapons officer's voice shook, "they're not just blocking our attacks. They're taking our energy." Captain Yoon's voice came again across all frequencies. "That was your only warning. Now you will see what Earth is truly capable of." The Leviathan's main cannons rotated toward the nearest Confederation vessels. They didn't fire beams or projectiles in the conventional sense. Instead, concentrated points of what looked like absolute darkness emerged, pulling light and matter toward them as they moved. "Gravitational weapons," gasped Dew's science officer. "They've weaponized gravity itself." 3 Confederation ships were caught in the effect. Their shields, designed to repel energy attacks, did nothing against a force that bent space itself. The ships crumpled inward like toys in a giant's hand before imploding completely. Panic spread through the alien fleet. Ships began breaking formation, some firing wildly, others turning to flee. "Maintain discipline," Du shouted. "Focus all fire on their weapon ports." But the Leviathan was already moving, accelerating with a speed that seemed impossible for its size. It sliced through the Confederation formation, its secondary weapons firing precise shots that disabled rather than destroyed. On the Leviathan's bridge, Yoon studied the tactical display. Target their command ship. Disable engines only. Chief Engineer Han looked up from his station. "Captain, we could end this now. One shot from the main cannon would." "We're not here to slaughter them," Yoon interrupted. "Just to show them we can." The Leviathan pivoted smoothly, bringing its bow to bear on Admiral Du's command vessel. Smaller weapons fired, striking the alien ship's engine section with surgical precision. The massive dreadnought went dark, emergency lights flickering as its main power failed. Inside, Admiral Du grabbed a console to steady himself as his ship shuddered. "What just happened?" "They've disabled our engines and weapons," reported his engineer, "but left life support intact. They could have destroyed us completely." On Earth, in the UN Defense Council chamber, Commander Park and his staff watched the battle through satellite feeds. The room was silent, faces showing disbelief mixed with pride. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Kim. "It actually works." Park nodded slowly. "Better than we hoped." The Leviathan now moved through the remaining Confederation fleet like a predator among prey. It disabled ship after ship, never destroying those that stopped fighting. Its shields absorbed everything the aliens fired, growing stronger with each attack. Admiral Du watched through the viewport as his proud fleet was systematically neutralized. 17 conquered worlds had given the Confederation unshakable confidence in their superiority. That confidence was now shattered. "Sir," his communications officer said, "the human vessel is hailing us again." Captain Yoon's face appeared on the main screen. Her expression was stern but not gloating. "Admiral, your fleet is disabled. You have two choices: retreat beyond the boundaries of our solar system, or be destroyed." Du's scales had shifted to the pale blue of defeat. How did you hide this technology from us?" "You saw what you expected to see," Yoon replied simply. "A primitive species not worth respecting." The Admiral looked around his damaged bridge, at his injured crew. "We will withdraw." Yoon nodded. "You have 6 hours to collect your disabled vessels and leave our system. After that, any remaining Confederation ships will be considered hostile." The communication ended. Du stared at the blank screen, then at the massive black shape of the Leviathan visible through the viewport. It hovered there, a silent reminder of how badly they had underestimated humanity. "Send the retreat signal," he ordered quietly, "and prepare a full report for the Confederation Council." In Earth orbit, the Leviathan maintained position as the alien fleet slowly gathered its damaged vessels. News of the battle spread quickly across Earth. Videos of the massive ship rising from the ocean went viral within minutes. On the Leviathan's bridge, Captain Yoon received a transmission from Director Lee. "The world knows now," he said. "There's no going back." Yoon looked at her crew, at the technology humans had created in secret. "No," she agreed, "but there's going forward." As the Confederation fleet limped away from Earth, humanity faced a new reality. They were not alone in the universe, and they were not helpless. The Confederation fleet retreated to Jupiter's orbit, regrouping around the gas giant's moons. "We've lost 17 vessels," reported Du's tactical officer. "The human ship is pursuing." Admiral Du had sent urgent requests for reinforcements, but they would take days to arrive. "Prepare all remaining ships. We'll use Jupiter's gravitational field to our advantage." As Leviathan approached, 3 smaller vessels emerged from hyperspace alongside it, sister ships that had been hidden even more thoroughly than the flagship. Captain Yoon's voice came through again. "This is your final warning. Admiral, The battle that followed would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy. The human vessels executed maneuvers that should have torn their hulls apart, using Jupiter's gravity to slingshot at speeds the Confederation tracking systems couldn't follow. Admiral Du watched in horror as his carefully organized formation broke apart under the assault. The human vessels didn't fight like any fleet he had encountered. They adapted constantly, communicating and coordinating with a fluidity his more hierarchical command structure couldn't match. "They're hurting us," he realized too late. The human vessels had pushed the Confederation fleet into a position where Jupiter's massive gravitational pull left them with nowhere to retreat. "Surrender or be destroyed," came Captain Yoon's final ultimatum. Du looked at the remnants of his once proud fleet and gave the order to stand down. The massive form of Jupiter filled the view screens of Admiral Du's command ship. Its swirling storms and great red spot seemed to mock him as his damaged fleet limped into orbit around the gas giant. 20 remaining ships out of his original 37 took defensive positions around the moons of Io and Europa. Each vessel bore scars from their encounter with the human ship Leviathan. "Status report," Du demanded, his scales now a dull gray of exhaustion and shame. "Emergency repairs underway on all vessels," his second officer reported. 13 ships have lost main weapons. 8 have compromised shield generators. All have functional engines, but at reduced capacity. Du nodded grimly. His career, built on 17 successful campaigns across the galaxy, now hung by a thread. Never had he faced such a humiliating retreat, but he was not defeated yet. "The gravity of Jupiter gives us an advantage," he told his officers, pointing to the tactical display. "We will position ourselves here, using the gravitational pull to accelerate our ships at key moments. When the human vessel approaches, we strike from multiple vectors." His tactical officer looked doubtful. "Admiral, with respect, that vessel absorbed our strongest attacks." "How will?" "They surprised us once," Du interrupted sharply. "It will not happen again. Besides, reinforcements will arrive within 30 hours. On the bridge of the Leviathan, Captain Yoon studied the enemy positions with calm intensity. Her ship had suffered minimal damage, its shields having absorbed and repurposed the energy from the Confederation attacks. "They're setting up a defensive formation around Jupiter's moons," reported her tactical officer. Yoon nodded. "Clever. The gravity well gives them acceleration options without using engine power." Director Lee's face appeared on a side screen. "Captain, we've detected a transmission from the Confederation fleet. They've called for reinforcements." "Expected," Yoon replied. "Time until arrival." "Approximately 30 hours." Yoon made her decision. "Then we finish this now." She opened a channel to Earth. "Commander Park, activate Project Trident." At 3 separate locations on Earth, beneath the Atlantic Ocean, the Gobi Desert, and the Antarctic ice, massive hangar doors opened. 3 ships, smaller than Leviathan, but built with the same technology, rose from their hiding places. Each had been kept separate from Leviathan, a precaution in case one facility was discovered. The ships, Poseidon, Ares, and Athena, accelerated rapidly out of Earth's atmosphere. Unlike conventional spacecraft, they moved without visible propulsion, manipulating gravity itself to pull them forward through space. Admiral Du was reviewing battle plans when the sensor alert sounded. "Admiral, 3 new vessels detected approaching from Earth." Du rushed to the view screen. The 3 new human ships were smaller than Leviathan, but moved with the same impossible grace. His heart sank. One such ship had disabled half his fleet. 4 would mean certain destruction. "All ships, battle stations," he ordered. "New formation Delta. Focus fire on the smaller vessels first." The Confederation ships moved into position, taking advantage of Jupiter's gravity to assume a spherical defensive formation. It was a textbook maneuver, taught in the Confederation War Academy for centuries. But the human ships didn't attack as expected. Instead, they split up, each taking a different vector of approach. The Leviathan headed directly for the center of the formation, while the three smaller vessels curved around to flank positions. "They're trying to surround us," Du realized. "Maintain formation. Do not break ranks." Captain Yoon's voice came through on all frequencies. "Confederation fleet, this is your final warning. Your unprovoked attack on Earth has been recorded and transmitted to all known civilizations in this sector. Surrender now or face the consequences." Du's pride would not allow surrender. All ships, open fire. The Confederation vessels unleashed a barrage of energy weapons. Beams of destructive force lanced toward the 4 human ships from all directions. But the human vessels didn't try to evade. Instead, they activated their shields, not the conventional energy barriers the Confederation used, but strange fields that bent light around them. The energy weapons struck these fields and simply disappeared, absorbed completely. Then the human ships began to move. Leviathan accelerated toward the center of the formation, while the 3 smaller vessels used Jupiter's gravity to slingshot themselves to impossible speeds. They curved and twisted in ways that defied conventional physics, executing maneuvers that should have torn apart any normal spacecraft. "How are they moving like that?" gasped Du's navigator. "Our targeting systems can't track them." The first strike came from Poseidon, the smallest of the human vessels. It fired precisely at the engines of 3 Confederation ships, disabling them without destroying them. The disabled ships began to drift helplessly in Jupiter's gravity. Athena struck next, its weapons taking out communication arrays and weapon systems. Ship after ship lost the ability to coordinate or fight back. Ares moved with brutal efficiency, neutralizing any ship that still showed signs of resistance. And at the center, Leviathan pushed steadily forward, an unstoppable force that scattered the once proud Confederation formation. Admiral Du watched in horror as his careful battle plan collapsed. The human ships didn't fight according to any doctrine he recognized. They didn't maintain formation or follow predictable attack patterns. Each vessel seemed to operate independently yet in perfect coordination with the others. Minister Song stepped forward. Unlike Captain Yoon, he wore civilian clothes, a simple gray suit. "You saw what you expected to see," he replied. "A common failing across all intelligent species, it seems." Whispers ran through the assembly. Many delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Let us be clear," Song continued. "Earth does not seek to replace the Confederation or to dominate. We seek only what any sentient species deserves: respect and equal standing." On the screens around the hall, images appeared showing the Leviathan and its sister ships. Technical data scrolled alongside, revealing capabilities that made many delegates gasp or murmur to their aides. "These vessels represent only a fraction of Earth's defensive capabilities," Song explained. "We have chosen to share this information as a gesture of transparency, not as a threat." The High Speaker's skin flushed a pale yellow, a sign of distress in his species. "What are your terms?" Song presented a simple document. "Full recognition of Earth's sovereignty, non-aggression guarantees, open trade on equal terms, and," he paused, "restitution for the lives lost in your unprovoked attack." The assembly erupted in voices. Some shouted objections, others whispered urgently to their neighbors. The High Speaker raised a limb for silence. "And if we refuse?" asked a heavily armored delegate from the back rows. Captain Yoon spoke this time. "Then Earth will stand alone, as we have already proven we can. But consider this. Would you rather have us as allies or as isolated neighbors, with no reason to trust you?" The wisdom of her words silenced the hall. 3 days later, as Captain Yoon prepared to return to Earth, she was approached by representatives from 3 species she had not seen in the main assembly. They were smaller beings, with signs of hardship evident in their appearances. "We are the Navori, the Tesk, and the Run," said the tallest among them. "For centuries, we have lived under Confederation rule, our resources taken, our people treated as second-class citizens." Yoon listened carefully as they explained their situation. These were species from worlds conquered by the Confederation long ago, much as Earth would have been if not for Leviathan. "We seek alliance with Earth, the Navari representative said. Your people have done what we thought impossible, stood against the Confederation and won. Within weeks, formal alliance proposals arrived on Earth from these species and others. The balance of power in the galaxy shifted overnight. The Confederation, once unchallenged, now faced a growing coalition of worlds united by their desire for true equality. Back on Earth, celebrations continued in cities around the world. The revelation of alien life, followed so quickly by the triumph of human ingenuity, had united the planet as never before. Old conflicts seemed petty in the face of a vast galaxy now open to exploration. On the observation deck of the Leviathan, now in orbit as the flagship of Earth's defense fleet, Captain Hume stood with Director Lee. Through the large viewport, they watched the stars and the blue curve of Earth below. The Navari ambassador shared something interesting today. Lee said quietly, their intelligence suggests the radical attack on Earth was actually authorized by the Confederation leadership. They wanted to test our capabilities before we became too advanced to easily conquer. Hume's expression remained calm, but her eyes hardened. Then they got exactly what they wanted, just not the results they expected. A small fleet of diplomatic vessels from various worlds approached Earth's orbit, their lights twinkling against the blackness of space. Each brought representatives eager to establish relations with the newest power in the galaxy. What happens now? Lee asked, watching the approaching ships. Now we build, Hume replied. Not just ships and defenses, but bridges. The galaxy is larger and more complex than we imagined. We need to understand it better. In the United Nations building in New York, a new chamber was being constructed, one with seats for representatives not just from Earth nations, but from allied worlds across the stars. Humanity was preparing to take its place in the galactic community, not as subjects or as conquerors, but as equals who had earned their position through ingenuity and determination. Admiral Dew, now stripped of rank and under house arrest on his homeworld, watched news broadcasts about the changing political landscape. He had lived his life believing in the natural superiority of the Confederation. Now that certainty was gone, replaced by questions he had never thought to ask. On his desk sat a small invitation. Earth was establishing a diplomatic academy and seeking instructors with knowledge of galactic cultures and history. Perhaps, Dew thought, it was time to learn as well as teach. As night fell across the Pacific Ocean, the water above the hidden base that had birthed Leviathan glowed softly with bioluminescent algae. Below, engineers were already designing the next generation of ships, not warships this time, but explorers and ambassadors. Earth would never be underestimated again, but perhaps in time it would be understood. The end.